Greetings from our Temecula studios. Welcome to the Hardwood Report. I'm Ryder Bullock, where tonight the bright lights of the NBA playoffs shine once again on the Western Conference semifinals, live from Target Center as the Minnesota Timberwolves take on the San Antonio Spurs. And the Minnesota Timberwolves will try to even this series at 2 games apiece against the San Antonio Spurs, a team that suddenly looks every bit like a championship contender. The Spurs come into Game 4 with a 2-1 series lead after a commanding performance in Game 3, a game that reminded the basketball world just how dangerous San Antonio can be when Victor Wembanyama controls both ends of the floor. The 7'4" superstar delivered 39 points, dominated the paint defensively, altered countless shots, and once again looked like the future face of the league, except the future may already be here. And for Minnesota, tonight carries enormous importance. Fall behind 3-1 to this Spurs team, and history says the road back becomes incredibly steep. The Timberwolves have been resilient all season long, but they know they need a far more complete effort defensively after allowing San Antonio to dictate tempo for most of Game 3. Now, when you look at this matchup statistically, it's fascinating because these teams are remarkably similar in one critical area: perimeter shooting. Minnesota averages nearly 14 made three-pointers a game, while San Antonio averages just over 13. The difference in this series so far has been efficiency and pace. The Spurs are turning defense into offense, ranking among the league leaders in fast break scoring. And when De'Aaron Fox gets downhill alongside Wembanyama, San Antonio becomes very difficult to slow down in transition. For Minnesota, the focus tonight begins with Anthony Edwards. He scored 32 points in the last game, but the Timberwolves need more than scoring. They need leadership, shot selection, and defensive energy from their young superstars. Julius Randle has provided toughness and physicality throughout the postseason, while Rudy Gobert's rebounding and rim protection remain essential if Minnesota wants to regain control inside. One player to watch tonight for the Timberwolves is Naz Reid. His ability to stretch the floor could become a major factor because San Antonio's defense has done an excellent job collapsing into the paint against Edwards and Randle. If Reid can knock down perimeter shots early, it changes the spacing and opens driving lanes. Minnesota desperately needs that. Meanwhile, the Spurs continue to look deeper, faster, and more composed with every game in this postseason run. Over the last 10 games, they're averaging nearly 117 points per contest while holding opponents to just over 105. That's championship-level balance. And perhaps most impressive, they've done it with poise beyond their years. Of course, everything begins with Wembanyama, 25 points, over 11 rebounds, and more than 3 blocks a game this season. Those numbers, they almost sound fictional, but what makes him special is how completely he changes the geometry of the game. Minnesota has to think about him every second they're on offense, and on the other end as well. His ability to step outside and score and create matchup problems. No defense can fully solve it. The odds makers favor San Antonio by 4.5 tonight. The over-under set at 215.5. And if Game 3 taught us anything, it's that momentum in this series can shift quickly. Minnesota feeds off this home crowd, and the Target Center will be electric from the opening tip. More on this game in a moment, but first let's take you around the NBA. Earlier today, the New York Knicks walked into Philadelphia and ended the series. Not close, not dramatic, not a grind. They ended it in the first quarter. 11 threes in the first quarter. 11. That's not basketball. That's target practice. Deuce McBride comes out and hits 4 straight, and before Philly could even settle into the game, it's 20-6, and the building sounds like Madison Square Garden South. This was embarrassing for the Sixers, not just losing, not just getting swept, getting taken over in your building by Knicks fans, waving brooms and always Knicks towels, and it looked like Madison Square Garden, and this was all happening while the home team was getting buried under an avalanche of threes. That's a franchise-level humiliation, and for the Knicks, this is a statement. They're back in the Eastern Conference for the second straight year. Brunson didn't even have to go nuclear. McBride gets 25, Brunson gets 22, Hart and Towns give you 17 apiece, and the Knicks hit 25 threes. That's depth. That's balance. That's a team peaking at exactly the right time. Mike Brown deserves credit. 7 straight playoff wins after replacing Tom Thibodeau. That's not easy in New York. He's got them playing fast, confident, and ruthless. They didn't let Philadelphia breathe. Now, we got to talk about Philadelphia. Embiid finished with 24. Maxey gave you 17. But once again, the Sixers don't get past the second round. Since 2001. That's the stat. That's the cloud over the franchise right now. Another year, another injury-riddled Embiid postseason, another disappointing exit. Now the Knicks sit and wait. Cleveland or Detroit. Pistons lead 2-1. But whoever comes out of that series better understand something. The Knicks team is not just surviving anymore. They're not just tough. They're dangerous. Because when the Knicks shoot like that, defend like that, and bring half of New York with them on the road, good luck. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the 2026 NBA Draft Lottery delivered major drama as the Washington Wizards secured the number 1 overall pick for the first time since selecting John Wall back in 2010. After years of lottery frustration under the current format, Washington finally broke through following an 18-64 season and now sits in position to reshape the franchise with one of the strongest draft classes in recent memory. The biggest surprise of the night may have been the movement throughout the top 4. The Utah Jazz jumped to 2 despite entering with only the 4th best odds, while the Memphis Grizzlies landed at number 3 and the Chicago Bulls climbed all the way to 4th. Meanwhile, the Indiana Pacers and Brooklyn Nets, both tied for the best odds entering the lottery, slid to 5th and 6th. For Indiana, the lottery outcome was especially painful because the Pacers fell outside the top 4. Their number 5 pick now transfers to the Los Angeles Clippers as part of the February trade for center Ivica Zubac. Pacers president Kevin Pritchard publicly apologized to fans after the results, acknowledging the risk the organization took in trying to build a contender around a healthy Tyrese Halliburton next season. Attention now shifts to a loaded draft class headlined by A.J. DeBonsa and Darren Peterson, 2 players widely viewed as the frontrunners to go number 1 overall. DeBonsa led the nation in scoring as a freshman at BYU, while Peterson starred at Kansas despite battling injuries. Other projected top selections include Cameron Boozer and Caleb Wilson, giving this draft class star power at the top and significant depth throughout the lottery, with that entire Michigan national championship team, as well as Flemings from Houston and others. The lottery also reignited debate around tanking in the NBA. Several teams spent the final months of the season openly positioning themselves for lottery odds, prompting the league to consider major changes to the current system later this month. Ironically, the Jazz, recently fined by the NBA for conduct tied to competitive integrity concerns, still managed to move up in the lottery for the first time in franchise history. Now, with the draft order officially set, the focus turns toward June 23rd and which young superstar could become the next face of a franchise. That's what's happening in the NBA, and we got a big one tonight in Minneapolis. Spurs and Timberwolves, Game 4 of this Western Conference semifinal series. And right now, let's be honest about it, this game has a very, very big feel for Minnesota. Because if the Spurs walk into that building tonight and go up 3-1, you can start talking about this series being all but finished. That's the reality of it. Now listen, San Antonio has looked like the more complete basketball team through 3 games. Not just because they have the best player in the series right now, and they do, but because they've controlled the tempo, controlled the paint, and honestly, they've looked calmer in the biggest moments. And that starts with Victor Wembanyama. Game 3 was one of those performances where you sit there and say, okay, this is what the next decade of the league might look like. 39 points, efficient, dominant defensively, changed shots, blocked shots, altered the entire geometry of the game. Minnesota had stretches where they simply looked intimidated going into the lane. That's rare. Usually NBA teams adjust. Usually playoff teams find counters. Right now, Minnesota still looks like it's searching for answers. Now, Anthony Edwards was tremendous. 32 points. He competed. He attacked. He tried to drag them back into the game. But here's the issue for Minnesota. Too much of the burden offensively falls on Edwards when the game tightens. Julius Randle gives you scoring. Naz Reid gives you spacing. Gobert rebounds. But when the Wolves need a clean possession late in the clock, it almost always turns into Anthony Edwards trying to create something difficult. San Antonio, meanwhile, has layers offensively. That's why I think they've become so dangerous, because everybody focuses on Wembanyama, and obviously they should, but De'Aaron Fox changes the entire rhythm of the game. Fox pushes pace. He gets downhill. He forces Minnesota defense to collapse, and when the Spurs get into transition, they become very difficult to defend, because now when Wembanyama is running the floor, shooters are spacing, and suddenly you're giving up easy baskets before your defense is even set. The Spurs average over 16 fast break points per game, and that number matters in this series because Minnesota has not constantly controlled turnovers or transition defense. So if you let San Antonio play fast, you are playing directly into their hands. Now let's get into the chess match tonight, because this is where the series gets fascinating. For Minnesota, the first key is obvious. They have to make this game ugly. Not dirty, ugly. Low scoring, okay? Physical, half-court basketball. Grind possessions down. Take that full 24, because if this becomes a free-flowing game in the 115 range, advantage Spurs. Minnesota wants this game in the low hundreds. They want rebounding battles. They want long possessions. They want Gobert controlling the glass and forcing San Antonio into second chance defensive possessions. And I'll tell you another thing Minnesota has to do tonight, and they've got to get more from Julius Randle early. Not late, early. First quarter, because Edwards cannot spend the first 3 quarters carrying the offense and then still have enough legs in the fourth quarter to attack Wembanyama at the rim and do something special. Randle has to establish himself in the mid-post, attack those mismatches, and frankly, he's got the force to do so. San Antonio has to send help to the defenders there, and if Randle becomes passive, Minnesota's offense gets very predictable. Now the Spurs side right there, and the key is composure. Young teams sometimes can get ahead in a series and start hunting knockouts too early. They start forcing shots. They start playing highlight basketball instead of playoff basketball. San Antonio cannot do that tonight. You're on the road. Crowd's going to be wild. Minnesota understands the desperation here. So the first 6 minutes are going to be emotional. The building's going to be loud. The Wolves are probably going to be loud too. They're going to come out throwing punches offensively and trying to get the crowd fired up. The Spurs have to survive that first wave without getting rattled. And if they do, pressure shifts immediately back onto Minnesota, because the longer this game stays tight, the more the Timberwolves start hearing the noise. They know what 3-1 means. Everybody knows what 3-1 means. And so that's the story. Now I want to talk about the matchup that's really defining this series, and that's Gobert against Wembanyama. And honestly, this is where basketball has changed. These two Frenchmen, where Gobert is still the elite rebounder, still the elite rim protector, but Wembanyama, his fellow countryman, pulls him into places defensively that becomes uncomfortable. Wemby can handle, he can shoot over the top, he can space to the perimeter. So Gobert is constantly being forced into decisions. Stay near the basket, give up open jumpers, step out and risk getting blown by or stretched away from the rim. That's why San Antonio's offenses look so balanced. Wembanyama blends the defense before the play even starts. And then there's the three-point shooting. Minnesota actually shoots the three ball well to stay in this series. They average nearly 14 made threes a game, but the issue is consistency. One night they look explosive offensively. The next night they're in the garbage. They go through these long droughts where offense completely stalls. And San Antonio has to be more stable possession to possession if they want to win. Defensively, the Spurs have quietly been elite lately. Last 10 games, opponents averaging just over 105 points. That's championship-level defense. They protect the rim, contest shooters, and they recover fast defensively because of their length. That's why this team suddenly feels very real. Not cute, not ahead of schedule, but real. You watch them now and you start saying, wait a second, this might actually be the team nobody wants to deal with in the West. And I'll say this too, Wembanyama has already become the psychological center of every game. Minnesota is thinking about him on every drive, every rotation, every possession in the paint. When one player changes the mental approach of the opponent, that's superstar territory. Now, tonight's X Factor for me is actually not Wembanyama, but De'Aaron Fox. Everybody will focus on Edwards and Wembanyama, but to me, Fox determines pace. If Fox gets downhill early and creates transition opportunities, the Spurs will dictate this game, plain and simple. If Minnesota keeps him in front, forces him into those half-court jumpers, and limits transition, suddenly the Wolves can control the tempo, control that shot clock, and possibly win this game. So you say, Ryder, how do you see it? Well, I think Minnesota responds emotionally early. I think Edwards comes out aggressive. I think the crowd matters. I think Gobert rebounds better tonight. But I also think San Antonio has shown throughout this series that they execute better late. That matters in playoff basketball. So my pick tonight, I'm taking the Spurs to win a very, very close game. I think it's competitive into the final 5 minutes, but I trust San Antonio's balance more right now. I'm going to say Spurs 111, Timberwolves 108. I think it's very, very close. As for the play, I actually like the under 215.5. You say why? Well, because desperation games usually tighten defensively, rotations shorten, possessions slow down late, and Minnesota absolutely cannot afford to let this become a track meet. I think both teams defend with playoff intensity tonight, especially in the second half. So the official play, Spurs minus 4.5 and under 215.5. And if San Antonio wins tonight, start getting ready for conversations about the Spurs not just winning this series, but potentially representing the West. That will do it for me. I will see you at halftime. The call for tonight's game, Mike Tirico, Reggie Miller, and Jamal Crawford. We will see you at halftime.